All right, so good to see you both, and welcome to Third Space. It's I'm speaking to Fahim Nasrat and Emi Colucci, who are at the moment on a pilgrimage, a very unusual pilgrimage in Japan. And one of the outstanding things about it is it's a very long pilgrimage. It's 1,400 kilometers. So I'm going to hand over to both of you, and given that you've taken so much time out of your lives to devote to doing this, and it's not, as we said, it's not a small thing, 1,400 kilometers, a lot of it up, a lot of it down, steep mountains. What is it that motivated each of you to take that kind of time out in very busy professional and social lives to do this?
For me, this started 14 years ago, actually, this particular pilgrimage, when I came in Japan to do a fellowship at university near Kobe. And I chose to live in a small village in the mountains with a 8 years old widow, Michiko. It was a very wonderful woman. We strongly connected. Anyway, to cut a long story short, for New Year that year, we realized one of Michiko's dream, which was to go to Koya-san. Mount Koya is one of the sacred mountains in Japan. It's a very important, it is a kind of headquarter for the Shingon Buddhism. And she had dreamt over her life to go to this mountain, but she never had the chance. So for New Year, we went together. And that's where I discovered that this pilgrimage, in the context of also knowing about monks and other people who took this pilgrimage as the kind of a particular stage in their life, including for some of them to when they were potentially approaching death. And so I discovered the importance of this pilgrimage for Buddhism, for Japan. And I told myself I want to come back to Japan and take part in what is a very important part of Buddhism and particular Japan history.
How do we wind up here this time 14 years later? We met a monk the other day just to sidestep, and it was he was actually a monk that was associated with the Dalai Lama quite closely, which is interesting, a whole story by itself. But he said that as we departed, he gave us a leaf from the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, and he said the Buddha's teaching is, and it was something like, it's the Buddhist teaching can be seen as serendipity. I mean, you know, and we took that to mean there's many things. If you see the Buddha on the road, follow him. There's that interpretation, and then there is also the interpretation of that is here in Japan. When things happen, they happen once. So also respond fully. But then the serendipity together. Emi was able to. I'm just speaking on your behalf, but Emi was able to secure a fellowship here at Kyoto University and managed to be here. And then my life circumstances enabled us to also come. So she's already been here for 3 months before I joined her 3 months later. So a lot of factors have come up together, which almost seem too magical. So it is a long time to be away. You know, we're going to be doing this for you know, just around 2 months. So it is serious time. But it does go in sync with a lot of stories we're hearing about the people that do this and what happens here. So we seem to have come in mid-flow into something, but yeah.
Fascinating. Wow, amazing. So to expand on that a little bit, is there anything specific about pilgrimage itself as opposed to other forms of practice or spiritual pursuit that you have felt attracted to or have discovered?
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about this on our as we go through it. So one thing to say is we've discovered what pilgrimage is by doing this one in a different way to others. And some of it's through readings we've picked up along the way, people we've met, and so that's all happening. But one of the themes that have come through is the pilgrimage on this particular one, because it's unique in the world in that it's a circular pilgrimage. You start anywhere along the route, and then you can go traverse it any way you like, but it's a circular one. You end up, to complete it, you go back to the beginning. So there's that. But within that, the pilgrimage is actually the distance or the time walking or traveling between the checkpoints, which are the temples. So the pilgrimage is actually the journey in between, and there's many things here in Japan that we're picking up, but one is the concept of ma, which is the space between, is very significant. So in that, for me, having done many things in the past, this is a new way of understanding it, of the space between, and then what occurs then. And obviously the temples have their significance. So I think there's a huge amount in that, for me, that's been new.
Yeah, it is true. And then I mean, we have done also one in Italy a couple of years ago. We have Francigena done part of Camino de Santiago, and what is different from this pilgrimage, in addition to what Fahima said, is also the long history. This pilgrimage exists since more than 1,200. This year is 1,250 years, and the total there have been thousands of people coming from very different backgrounds, and even now we can see different kind of people who have undertaken this same journey in different ways for different reasons, different moment of life. And you are connected to that. So when you go along the path, you see signs, some of modern history, some of much longer ago. Today, we were taking a space where the founder of this pilgrimage, of the Shikoku Buddhism in Japan, Kobo Daishi, also known as Kukai, was allegedly was washed as a baby. So there is science that go throughout the history, and you are part of that. And being part of that, I think what makes also this kind of journey different, whatever that is for you, and become part of that history in your own way. So that makes it different from other long travelers. I love long distance hiking, long distance cycling. But it's something very different doing pilgrimage. It's not all about the physical challenge. It is also something different from being in like an ashrams, in other contexts where you can have very intense and very important as well, just the different experiences. 2 years ago, we were in India, in Shivananda Ashram, and that was very meaningful to us, but we were reflecting about being there. We had a structure every day, which was like somebody with a bell will come to wake you up in the morning at 5 o'clock, your meditation, yoga, your Vedic treatment. And there was something we were part of, which was somehow structured. Here is us. Every morning we decide when we wake up, where we go, how long we stay in a temple. So it's something that you really are building yourself. You're making sense of that constantly. Are you remaking sense? And now, you're asking us these questions while we are in it, and every day we talk about it, we have a different insight, a different understanding, or we build on it, so we are still in it. And so you're really making this our own experience, which is evolving.
Okay, and there's about so many things have come to mind over the time we've been doing this, because this is day 55. And we've been walking, but we haven't really stopped. This is our first stop in 55 days, really.
In the same place.
In the same place. So that adds a whole dimension, and you really feel connected to the arhants, or the monks way back at the beginning of Buddhism, or any lineage, I guess, or religion or spiritual pursuit that were wandering and didn't have a permanent place to stay. So you really tap into that. And I think we've got more and more into that flow of what it means to not have a fixed location, which is quite profound on many ways. But the other piece is really important, is the other henros, as they're called, which are the other pilgrims that you meet. So early on, we really kept on reflecting and bumping into people again and again. And then you formed a small sangha or living community, but it wasn't connected by space. It was connected. You were connected because you were doing it together. And then occasionally you'd meet, so there was this. You really it really struck a chord with you.
Yeah.
This moving community,
Mm.
rather than the one maybe in a fixed ashram where you're together with them, but you're doing this together, and that sense you're doing it with others. And this particular pilgrimage, like many others that are there, that does have signposts, but it's supported in so many ways by the culture here as well. So there's the other henros you're with, the other pilgrims you're doing it with, whether you meet them or not, or you speak to them or not. There's that thing, and then everyone acknowledges each other as you go by. But additional to that is the community here that actually makes this all possible. The tradition of, there's a tradition called the Osetai, which is giving gifts to pilgrims. So whether it's oranges, which we end up carrying, which is quite a lot if you're walking 20 kilometers, you get a lot of oranges and you get a lot of support. People will stop in the car. The other day we had someone, we asked them where the water source was, and then 20 minutes later he found us in the middle of the field, having cycled, I don't know for how long, to give us green tea in a bottle. And these kinds of things. So the support that you're getting, and the respect, I guess, and in some way we're also giving back to them as well.
Right, that's very beautiful. So there's a real, in that sense, then there's a real respect for this pilgrimage, is what it represents. That's why they're so supportive. The culture is so supportive of you. No, that's really fascinating. It's good to hear, because you think of Japan as being the super ultra modern, which it is too, which we can touch on later, but it's so good to hear this, that this is alive. I wanted to just go back to one or two things you said. And Fahim, you mentioned the power of, part of the power of the experience of pilgrimage that you're both on now is not having a place to stay. And Emmy, you referred to that too, the difference between being in an ashram or a temple or something where you're in a space. But there is something about that the place, the space between, and not necessarily having a place to, you know, to know that you're going to stay, that you're going to end up. Could you just say a little bit more about what the nature of that impact is?
I'll just add a little bit at the beginning there. So there are places that you're able to stay, and you can book those, and all of that is possible. It's quite a logistical feat to do. So that's just one extra element on top, which is the having to deal with the logistics, which is kind of probably one of the tests of this particular pilgrimage, because it's so long and you have to plan that. And sometimes planning these things, you don't really want to be in that mindset, but it's a part of the test. So it's actually part of it. But I think what you're picking up on is what we've experienced more recently is there's always a place to stay. And that is amazing, because you feel very safe in this particular pilgrimage to be wherever you are. So yeah, that being said, it isn't that there, you don't necessarily know where you're going to be. It's the fact that you will be somewhere different almost every single night. And that I think is the interesting point. We've noticed, we're like, oh, we don't really need to be fixed, and there's so many things you don't need. And that goes also with your own thoughts that you carry with you. You start realizing you need to carry less and less of those notions that always come back, and that's my experience. I don't know.
That's true. And the carrying less and less of the notions, also carrying less and less of things, because we are walking up mountains, down mountains with our backpacks. Yeah. So the first week we realized we had too much, and also like it's a very kind of concrete realization about how much in general we carry life. Symbolically, metaphorically, and practically, it is completely unnecessary. So the kind of also of let go of the comfort in general, like of even knowing where you're going to stay, or go in a place where you know you're going to have a laundry, you're going to have a wash, a nice bath, which is being very lovely, but it's something different. Also, you are more connected to the temples, to nature, because now we are camping quite a bit. Tonight we are staying in a temple. It was a mansion where Kukai was born, and this temple is not open for people to stay, just because a friend of mine from Kyoto knows the monk. She's a musician. She did a performance here, and he kindly accepted us to be there. So you also rely more on people in terms of, and you also feel really more the interdependence that we have. You know, in a society where we are somehow kind of almost taught that realistically, you know, we can just be who we are, do what we want, what we have, as long as we have a credit card we can, you know, pay with, then that's all we need. Then you really, you know, have to depend on others in terms of finding a place where to stay, or people letting you stay. There's also part of really being faced by the reality that we are all connected to this moving community, if I mentioned, but also to have to rely on each other. And I think that's also why sleeping outside, sleeping outdoor. We also slept at the porch of a temple where a very lovely monk just said, sleep here on this bench kind of step. And we had no tent at all. It was also part of the ascetic training. And you can see why when you're taking this part, how it's part of practice.
I was just thinking a little bit about the people that you've met along the way, not just the co-pilgrims, but also the support people, or just the citizens who are living in that part of the world. And it almost sounded to me at times that it was almost like a subculture. I might be wrong, but you met this couple that were involved in rewilding. Do you want to say a little bit about that? Because again, that was news to me. I don't think of Japan having that subculture of people who have left the cities, etc. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. So yeah, I think it is true, as far as we know, and like obviously this is a snapshot, and we're in a very specific context. But Shikoku as the island has I've forgotten the meaning of it, but it also means in history, and I'm trying to reach for exactly where we learned this, but it's always been a place for retreat. In fact, in fact, it has this connotation of leaving with your back to Japan. So it's a place where people have come, and obviously thousands of years, or 1,000 years certainly, where ascetics and monks would go to practice within nature. So it's always been that. I don't know, and I can't comment for what the rest of Japan because it has a very rich, the Shinto faith and everything goes way back. So so it is a bit of a subculture as far as we know. And then we've just come across these little pockets where we've met people which seem to reinforce that it's an alternative view on the more modern Japan. So we've met many people that are maybe part of this community that support through having guest houses for pilgrims specifically. And they have either done the pilgrimage, found themselves on a pilgrimage and realized something, and decided that actually they needed to have a big change. But interestingly enough, it's often been someone from somewhere else in Japan coming and then meeting someone from Shikoku and often ending up marrying them. And then you find these things happening. So it's a bit of there's two things going on, I think, in that regard. So yeah.
And there is this thing, as I mentioned, about Shikoku, because of this pilgrimage having this strong community that supports it, and it's something really you can see. We're taking a lot of photos of people improvising signs, because it's actually very easy to get lost, particularly when you go a bit off the beaten path. We are doing not only the 88 temples, so Shikoku connects 88 particular temples, but also there is 20 Bekkaku, which are kind of special temples. And also along the way, there are other important sites like waterfall, where trainings, monks, for different kind of religion, like Shingon and Yamabushi, which is joins together some kind of indigenous Japanese belief system, Shinto and Buddhism. Also do the ascetic trainings, and all these other locations.
The 88 plus the 20 make up what we're doing,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah, so when you
108.
go out to the path, like to go to these places, then you see people improvise signs, so you don't get lost. And there is we can feel the presence of the community being there, and historically it's been like that. People will come here, and there was we actually learned the last day that there is still today in theory this kind of almost policy that somebody dies in Shikoku, wherever they die, the community there has to bury them, take care of the person. And we have met some people who are lifetime wonders, like they are pilgrims for the whole lifetime. And we slept in a temple with one of this, what we believe was one of this person, who you can see that they didn't know where they were going next. That is actually, it is their life.
He had done it how many times? Over 50 times.
Yes, so that is a kind of a life. Yeah.
He had done this
And
pilgrimage over 50 times.
Yeah. It's actually, Shikoku is famous. There is something called, they find the Shikoku illness. I don't remember the Japanese word for it. For people who basically do Shikoku for all their life. Like, they have to come back.
It's called the sickness. Sorry, yeah.
Shikoku sickness. And there is actually two anthropologists in UK who have recently released a book that they specifically research this aspect around people who return to do it, and people do it in section. People do it. We found not so many people doing all together like we are doing in one go. More people, especially Japanese, might split it, but then you find people who do this as what they do.
No, so there is this, and I think this happens in many other. I know it happens in the Hajj and other pilgrimages, where if you die on the pilgrimage, it is it's a fast track ticket to whatever comes next in a good way. So there is that aspect to it. So some people come to with that in mind, and then we were reflecting on that yesterday, actually saying, well, actually, as you go on the pilgrimage, you actually get stronger, and there's a lot of health benefits as well. So then these guys end up walking because they're actually getting better and better, and then they live long. We met this gentleman yesterday, in fact, who was 82 and doing it.
Amazing.
And he was doing it to visit but he was a lifelong hiker and traveler as himself. So he was a bit we don't know if he's unique, but we're hearing and meeting people certainly in the 70s. We've definitely come across people in their 80s that are doing this for various reasons. Anyway, there's a whole other thing there, but yeah.
People we are meeting are interesting because of the different story, different situation, different point. They are this kind of community that forms. And when I say community, it's not like something like Camino Santiago when you are working at it or anybody has worked. You actually meet people. Yeah, we have many days we don't meet anybody. Like we don't see people. So that's what is interesting. So it's not the meeting in society because you go somewhere and you end up going in a bar and having drinks together. It's none of that. It's like you might not meet people physically or maybe from far away or not nobody, but you can see sign of being part of this moving community, present and past. Yeah, so that's what I'm referring to. But we met so many interesting people at different pilgrims or host monks and others. So that we actually are filming them, and we're hoping to make a documentary. Maybe to make a documentary. So it was part of my fellowship for being here in Kyoto. I wanted to do a kind of a pilot visual research. So I'm a professor in London, and I teach about using film as a research method. In Fahim, we wanted to kind of join forces with this, joining Fahim's own history and practice and my own interest to make a documentary about Shikoku. We were not sure what will be the focus exactly, but then we met so many interesting people having such interesting stories and contributing in different ways to make Shikoku what the special thing it is that we now are collecting these stories.
If I could just say, so what sounds quite unique about this pilgrimage is you've both referred to it in different ways, is you've entered into a stream that goes way back and is current, right? That's what it sounds like. It's a very kind of recognizable, a stream really. It's a lot that's living and that you are then part of, and all these other people are part of. Is that
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many, you know, it's like anything, the layers get peeled away and you start seeing it from different facets. So if we zoom out, there's 4 parts to the pilgrimage, because the Shikoku's split into 4 prefectures, which are kind of regions that they have around in Japan. So the first one is all about intention, and it has a name. The second one is about discipline and austerity. The third one is enlightenment. And the fourth one is nirvana.
No, we are entering the nirvana.
So,
stage.
and so we're layering our experience, and you know, we met someone. So this just goes back to, I'm not sure totally why I'm saying this to you right now, but it's fascinating, the structures within structures you fall in, but it's all very free at the same time.
Right.
And you know, obviously we're learning and we're really engaging with many aspects of the pilgrimage in a way which is it's really is amazing, because you feel that on the one hand, and we met this person that said Kobe Daishi, the founder of or one of the major contributors to the pilgrimage, because there's things were happening on this island before he arrived, you know, so he took part in it, like the Buddha would have taken part in aesthetic practices himself that already existed. But the fact that he came up with this thing of moving through, we were talking to this professor that is of Buddhist philosophy, right? Who's one of these people that he himself called himself, he's got the sickness of Kevin. He's done it many times, 20 times or so. And he was describing how, you know, there's a structure that psychologically, as you go through it, you know, you've got to get clear on your intention as you go through. And you're like, for the first 10 days, you're wondering, why am I doing this? You know, and you're going through it as your body's adjusting to things and your mind's doing whatever it's doing. And it took, you know, a few weeks for that to suddenly just as a question to disappear, because you suddenly realize the doing of it starts revealing it as you're doing it. So there was that. And then you moved into a different way where there was very long stretches where there's nothing and nobody, pretty much. And then you're like, okay, we're definitely in the austerity discipline aspect, you know. And then different things come up of the kinds of foods you want and all of that kind of thing, you know. So you're entering into this kind of place. And then the third place, there's a relief from a lot of it. So it's almost like there is a structure within a structure, and it reveals itself to you. And you know, it's a little bit like living the Dharma in some way. Yeah, and everyone goes through it, and that's the fascinating thing. You don't really have to know enough; you just do it, and then things unravel, right? Yeah. In a good way.
Yeah, and I mean, although and we also found that although, and it's very beautiful that people are constantly told it and know that, you know, you can do Shikoku in whatever way you can do it. Obviously, not everybody can work it, because for physical reason and financially, obviously, it's a burden to be, you know, to have to be away somewhere else for many days, or you know, at the months, so people can do it as they want. But definitely, we have found that working it. So being with your own body, sometimes we look back and we look like that yesterday. We would come down for a month and we slept on this temple in a small room in this temple, up to a mountain, almost 1,000 meters. And then we came here and we walked for 29 kilometers, the before 38 kilometers. And you look back and you say like, wow, you just come all the way from there, and that, I know, and also you can imagine along the way what happened, the people you met, the encounter you had, the reflection you had. You know, it is a form of walking meditation, and I really love walking meditation, because in general I find it is an embodied form of meditation, and you go in this kind of flow. But there is also another dimension about being in another country, speaking another language. You know, there is snakes. Yesterday we were walking about temple. There was a snake just there on the footpath. You know, there are other things, and the surrender. It's constantly you are kind of asked to just surrender, and that's such a beautiful teaching.
Right.
And just one more to add to that. Yesterday we were talking about this and we were experiencing it. We've also read it as well. So it was like reflecting on things you pick up. But one of the things is the mind can't. It's to do with location and distance. There's only so much the mind can actually process. So when we look back and saw how far we'd come, because it was up at the mountain and we were down by the sea, and you realize the limitation of the mind to be, because it actually can't encompass reality, because we've actually walked that,
Right.
but you can't. The mind can't conceive of it. So you start to understanding in a very real way that life exists way beyond the mind. Because the mind is conceptual and it has a certain limitation, which is very local. It's extremely local. And this is another aspect which I think you really, it blows you away, because there's a certain consciousness you're in, which is you're in the flow. And that isn't just of the mind, isn't just thinking,
right.
And yet you're doing it with all parts of your being in a very different way. So it really brings to life the fact that the overemphasis that we have on knowing exactly how it all works, because you actually experience. I'm experiencing it. I did that, but I can't actually conceive of it. It's not. I'm not able to hold it. So it's kind of like almost I haven't really thought about it this way, but thinking about, well, actually, humility is often thought of as this hard won thing, but actually we get to experience it in a very light way, because you're like, oh my God, really? I just did that. And I don't know how, Emmy keeps saying, well, thanking her, she keeps having conversations with her legs and her body saying, thank you. for
Thank you for following this wild idea. Yeah.
That's amazing, and it's also very beautiful to hear, the kind of surrender too. As you were both speaking, it made me just reflect a little bit what walking meditation is in this case. Quite different than the more formalized, Theravada that many of us have learned. But it's quite profound what you're speaking about in terms of that. So. I think we're sort of coming to the end, but what I wanted to ask you both is a couple things, actually, because you've said a lot about your experience, and it's clearly still happening. You're in process. It's, you're in the middle of it, as you both said. But is there anything that you could point to that, and there may not be, that really stands out in your personal experience of this, that you weren't expecting, and that was, very more impactful even than everything else?
Something I was not expecting, and I guess having grown up in a kind of very Catholic way in Italy, and having done spiritual retreats in the context, and being interested for my own scholarly interest about spirituality and healing and religion, and my own personal quest, I guess, into different kind of traditions. In Japan, not all, but many temples have different roles, have different functions, have different way of presenting themselves compared to like what we experienced in Ladakh or in other places around the world. So they often are, there is lots of them. And because they also are made of wood, they cost a lot of money to support. There is a lot of things around, selling things, doing rituals that cost money. There is amulets to be sent. So it's a bit of a different place. I guess I was expecting more to arrive in a place and there is a monk and there is a community of religious, the spiritual practitioners that you could join, and that doesn't happen. That's when then also the reflection about the pilgrimage is going in between the temples rather than being at the temple. And sometimes, like today in this place, we really, we entered this place, we went, okay, we are home, we really feel at home. And there is this kind of situation when they happen, but that's not the way Shikoku is. And that is different. I was not expecting that, and has required a shift of a relationship with what pilgrimage is actually. So that has been one of them. The other one is about even when you plan sometimes, but even when you plan, we planned this very carefully. If I am with his own life commitment and myself with my own work, I had to take organizing my work to be able to be away for so long. Even so, there has been so many demands so many things happening, both family-wise, like, you know, my sister became very unwell and she's unwell. And so the being here, but also having this worry about her, and professionally, you know, I have a lot of projects, teams, and there is all this kind of demand. So how hard it is to carve time, even when you plan it, carve time for yourself, but how that to be able to every day having this coming in as a like a meditation flow. You see this thing happening, and then you have to remember there is a sun above the cloud, and then, you know, breathe in and breathe out, and see this just be part of life, but not become what your life is all about, and every day to be to be part of that, to take that, and be able to be connected to the world, because we are part of it, but also be here right now, because this is such a great opportunity and potentially a one in a lifetime. So these are things that I was not expecting. There are many others, but these two are the ones that come to my mind. What about you?
I think, you know, the main thing that's really impacted me again and again is the effect it has on the other pilgrims, particularly the Westerners that are coming. And it's really heartening, you know, to see people, and people have found themselves on this pilgrimage for very, very different reasons. But there is a theme that a lot of people watched documentaries made in different languages in different countries, which just kind of alluded to the Shikoku in some way, or it was a cycling video and they were here or something, all sorts of things. But the genuine kind of transformation that people seem to go through, and I don't think it's unexpected, but it's so beautiful when we're seeing it, and it's people very, you know, that we meet several times, and then we get to, you know, you get close enough to ask them, you know, how's it going and what's happening. And there's enough just trust to just speak about it. And a lot of people have just talked about this process of unfolding, and talking about the kindness of everybody. And some beautiful man from the US, he talked about, you know, he really felt, you know, it impacted him how kind people are. But he said it in a certain way, which it isn't just like a superficial kindness. It really gave him a sense of what humanity is capable of, you know, outside of the, you know, the driven culture that a lot of us come from. So I think that has, to be fair, that's been just reinforced me again, you know, the power of these things, the power of pilgrimage, and for myself as well, just a reflection of how human, you know, we all are. And that's actually the moment, you know, in the end, you do these wild things, but in the end, you come back to very simple humanity. So, you know, which is really what it's about. So, yeah.
Connection, belonging. It is a fundamental human need, and pilgrimages rely on that. They are that.
Yeah.